Khyber Pass, a road forged into the cliffside in 1848 by the railway king, George Hudson. Following the decline of the whaling industry in the early 1800s, Hudson planned to revitalise Whitby as a seaside resort. He began by buying up all the land on the west cliff and used the Khyber Pass to bring building materials from the harbour. When the building work was finished, it provided a good route down to the town for the holidaymakers staying in the hotels above. We're not allowed to stop because we have to carry on up the Khyber. Ahead on the left, the little tunnel called Hudson's Folly was built in the form of a miniature railway tunnel at the request of George Hudson, simply to make his mark. There's no railway running along it, but if you walk to the other end, you'll be rewarded with a lovely view of the town. Coming up on the left is the only house on the Khyber Pass, called Strensham, the name of Whitby in the 7th and 8th centuries. After a monastery was re-established in the 11th century, Whitby was known as Preston, which translates to Village of the Priests, and didn't get its current name, Whitby, which means white settlement, until around the 12th and 13th centuries. The La Rosa Hotel on the left has a blue plaque explaining that Lewis Carroll, the author of Alice in Wonderland and Alice Through the Looking Glass, stayed there occasionally. The next stop is Whalebones. Also here is a statue of the famous explorer Captain James Cook and superb views of Whitby Harbour. The archway on the right was erected in 2003 and is a jawbone of a bowhead whale. Sitting on top is a harpoon to signify this part of Whitby's history. In the 18th century, whaling was a major industry in Whitby. Over 55 whaling boats, each with up to 50 crew, operated from the harbour. The original arch was erected in 1853. This arch was donated to Whitby after being obtained legally by native Alaskan Inuits. Next to the arch is the statue of Captain James Cook, a world explorer and mapmaker of the 18th century. He moved to Whitby when he was just 18 and became a master mariner within the whaling fleet. The ships he used for his 3 famous voyages, each lasting over 3 years, were all built in Whitby. These voyages saw him sail thousands of miles through unmapped waters around the world. His statue is deliberately positioned looking towards the South Sea Islands, which he discovered, and not straight out to sea. Cook's 4 ships, the Adventure, Discovery, Endeavour and Resolution, followed the design of Whitby cats that were used to get close to the shore for the local alum trade. This design meant they were highly suitable for exploring unknown depths of water without the fear of becoming stuck. Whitby's 2 piers directly face due north. In the summer, on a good day, it's possible to see the sun rise and set into the sea. We're parked next to the biggest hotel in Whitby, the Royal Hotel. It was built around 1840 by the railway king George Hudson for the sum of £3,000. A review in 1848 stated the Royal was fitted up in a very splendid manner in every regard to elegance and comfort. George Hudson was a politician and rail financier and controlled much of the national rail network. He was inspirational at linking London to Edinburgh by rail and also brought the railway to Whitby. To the left is Whitby's Royal Crescent. It was supposed to replicate the one built in Bath Somerset. Unfortunately, George Hudson, who was financing the project, was not a completely honest man. He was investigated, lost his seat as a politician, went bankrupt, and was forced to live abroad to avoid arrest for debt. As you can see, the half crescent was never completed. On the right is a sculpture on the Whitby Heritage Trail of William Scoresby. He was a prominent Whitby whaler, explorer, and inventor in 1807 of the mast-topping lookout called a crow's nest. Coming up on the right is the top of the cliff lift. An operational 36-metre vertical lift will take you to the beach below. At low tide, you can walk all the way to Sunset and then back, which is a total distance of just under 3 miles. The next stop is West Cliff Attractions. Please remember to take everything with you, including your partner. The cliffs in the far distance are the Kettleness Cliffs. Alum was mined there between 1727 and 1871. Alum is a red mineral that was used in the tanning industry to dye leather products, such as shoes and clothes. On your right, as we turn into Argyle Road, you'll see a large building. It was built in 1898 and was the first iron-framed building in Whitby, and the first in the town to have mains electricity. Originally, it was a hotel with a proper Victorian ballroom. The majority of the building has since been converted for accommodation. Looking down to the far end of Ladysmith Avenue on the right is the grandstand of Whitby Town Football Club, which is also known as the Seasiders. The Saxonville Hotel was the childhood home of Margaret Storm Jameson, who was an English journalist, author, and the president of English PEN, the world's oldest human rights organisation. Just before we turn left at the roundabout, take a look straight ahead down Station Avenue. At the end, you'll see a low red brick building, which was once West Cliff Station. The last trains ran along the line from Middlesbrough to Scarborough in May 1958. Ahead on the right are two 3-storey houses. The long, bottle-shaped window in each house cleverly gives light to parts of the house that originally had poor lighting. One theory for this style of window was to get around paying the so-called window tax, introduced by William Pitt in 1796, but this is not proven. It's also suggested that owners bricked their windows up to get around paying the tax, but both methods were just to make the building look symmetrical. The next stop is Pannet Park and Museum. On the left is the site of the original Union Mill, a tower windmill built in 1800 to provide cheap milled grain for local poor people. The building ceased operation in 1888 after severe storm damage. The windmill was finally demolished in 1923, and the remaining mill building was converted into private apartments in 2010. As we go round the roundabout, we'll travel down Chum Hill Road, which was built in 1886. On the left is Pannet Park. It's named after the very generous Robert Elliott Pannet. He bought Chum Hill Estate so he could give it to the town. In his will, dated October 1917, he arranged for it to become a public park and made provision for a museum to be built to house his collections. The park and museum were opened in 1928, just 8 years after his death. left is Whitby's floral clock, which was installed in 1953 to mark the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II. After years of neglect, the clock was reinstated in 2006 by the Friends of Pannet Park. In the bottom left corner of Pannet Park is a pathway that depicts plants and fossils from the Jurassic period, around 150 to 200 million years ago. There's also a life-size replica of the first ever gharial crocodile discovered at Saltwick Bay, just south of Whitby in 1824. As we head up the prospect, passengers upstairs need to be aware of low and overhanging trees. Before Whitby developed, owners of the large houses on the right would have enjoyed an excellent view or prospect of Whitby. In several gardens on the right before the junction, you can see spiky Chilean pine trees, which are more commonly known as monkey puzzle. The mineral jet, which comes from the fossilized remains of the tree, was the center of a big industry in Whitby in the 19th century. Which was actually built in 1980. We cannot stop on the bridge, but we'll slow down, so please have your cameras ready. There's a great view of the town on the left, and on the right, you can look along the river towards the North Yorkshire moors in the distance. Below, on the left, the buildings occupy the original Whitehall shipyard, which closed in 1902. Its demise was due to steel ships becoming too big for the harbour. Parco Engineering now builds vessels in Whitby and keeps the shipbuilding tradition alive. We're turning left into an area called Gallows Close, which was used for executing criminals by hanging. These hangings were public events, and people used to walk for miles to come and watch. Some even made a day of it and brought picnics. Coming up on the left, the white building is Whitehall. It was originally owned by the Turnbull family, who owned the shipyard below. It became a school during the Second World War until 1985, and it's now a private residence. The original 1800s Spittal Bridge is coming up on the left, but the one we'll cross was built in the 1930s. Spittal is short for hospital. A hospital stood near here from 1109 to 1539 to house patients suffering from the very contagious disease called leprosy. The two bridges were used in World War II as air raid shelters. We're now commencing the steep climb up Green Lane. Green Lane, historically nicknamed Hearse or Corpse Road, was the route taken by rich people in their horse-drawn carriages to get to the church and graveyard near the Abbey. And to carry their coffins up the 199 steps. More recently, national cycling races have used Green Lane as part of their route. Whitby Regatta is one of the oldest sea regattas in the country. It's been entertaining crowds for over 170 years. Regatta Weekend runs annually in August with a host of events, including a variety of boat races, exhibitions, and a grand firework finale. Whitby Goths, started in 1994, has grown into one of the world's premier goth events and brings thousands of people to the town in April and October. Whitby also hosts a variety of themed events throughout the year, including steam rallies, Viking and pirate weekends, and a week-long folk festival. approaching Whitby Abbey, first founded by King Oswy of Northumbria in AD 657 as a monastery for men and women. 7 years later, in 664, a major Christian meeting took place when it was decided that Easter would be celebrated on the first Sunday after the full moon on or after the 21st of March. This is because they were using the lunar calendar and not the calendar we use today. About 200 years later, the abbey was ransacked and almost completely destroyed by Vikings. It wasn't until around 1070 that the Normans re-established a monastic community here. The remains that you can see mostly date from a later building, erected in about 1220. Like most monastic establishments in the country, Whitby Abbey was dissolved and destroyed by Henry VIII in 1539. It then passed into the hands of the wealthy Chumley family, but it gradually fell into disrepair. Since then, it's been battered by the weather and even suffered direct hits from the German Navy in the First World War. From 1984, the abbey has been looked after by English Heritage. The main building on the right of the road is the Whitby Brewery, which was founded in 2013, for those of you interested. The large building next to the abbey is Abbey House. It was built by the Chumley family, using stones from the derelict abbey. It's now the home of Whitby Youth Hostel, Abbey Visitor Centre and Cafe. The next stop is Whitby Abbey, at the top of the 199 steps. If it's lunchtime, the driver will advise.
See if we can get some seats so underneath, and then Dad can sit out. We just need to wait and see what we can get. Oh,
It's very packed.
there's maybe a lot of people go here though, darling, like we did, hopefully.
Fight for the top bit. Do I have to show them what we have for upstairs?
Can you what?
She wants to sit here.
Dad's filming, but you got to sit there the last time. Just take turns. Okay.
Did you see it?
More trees.
Coming up on the left, the stone pillar was originally considered to be the remains of a cross associated with the abbey. However, following the excavation of what is thought to be a Saxon settlement up here, it's now believed to be a market cross from that era. In the early hours of the 30th of October 1914, the hospital ship Rohilla struck rocks at Saltwick Bay just south of Whitby. What happened next was one of the most challenging rescue operations in history. Whitby's lifeboat could not be launched from the harbour, so it was carried by hand over an 8-foot seawall and across rocks so that it could be launched from the beach nearest the ship. 85 lives were lost, but 229 people were rescued. One person who survived was Mary Kezia Roberts. She'd survived the sinking of the Titanic just 2 years earlier in 1912. Along the coast near Whitby, people are still finding Whitby Gem, one of the earliest of gemstones used to create artifacts and items of jewelry. The gem found is approximately 182 million years old. Jet has been used in Britain since the Neolithic period and was fashionable until the end of Roman Britain. Straight ahead in the middle distance, you can just see a large red brick viaduct. It's a 5 million brick, 13-arch structure, nearly 280 metres long, with the rail level nearly 40 metres above the river. It was originally built to take the Whitby to Scarborough railway line across the Esk Valley. Construction began in October 1882 and was completed by October 1884 at a cost of £20,000. The railway was closed down during the 1963 beaching cuts and the viaduct fell into disrepair. It's now being restored and open to walkers, horse riders and cyclists. On the left, we're approaching Captain Cook Crescent, a reminder of Whitby's links with that great mariner. Cook served his apprenticeship in Whitby, and his 4 exploration ships were built here. On his 3rd voyage in 1779, whilst charting the North Pacific Ocean, Cook was attacked and killed in a confrontation with some Hawaiians. He left a legacy of scientific and geographical knowledge which was to influence his successors well into the 20th century. Numerous memorials worldwide have been dedicated to him, including here in Whitby. At the bottom of the hill to the right is Church Street, which dates from 1318. It leads all the way to the bottom of the 199 steps. Coming up on the right-hand side of the road is a raised footpath, which is made from stones from an old monk's trot. These paths used to connect abbeys, monasteries and churches all over the North York moors. They were particularly useful at the time of the dissolution of the monasteries from 1536. The monks used them to escape with the treasures and manuscripts from the abbey for safekeeping. Shortly, we'll be joining the A171. To the left, the road will take you across the North York moors, past Robin Hood's Bay to Scarborough, and to the right over New Bridge towards the town centre. Once we're on the bridge, look left for a view along the river towards the moors. Look right for a great view of the harbour and town. And if you look down, you may be lucky and see a North Yorkshire Moors Railway steam or vintage diesel train. The River Esk is one of the best rivers in England for salmon fishing. The river starts near a village called Westerdale, and then meanders about 28 miles through the North York moors and ends between the Piers and Whitby. The River Esk is the only major river of North Yorkshire to flow directly into the North Sea. All the others flow into the River Tees or Humber first. Trees on the right, you can see Airy Hill Manor. It was originally built for Admiral Sir Robert Mawson. In 1805, he commanded the HMS Revenge in the Battle of Trafalgar. The manor is now private apartments. On the left, a couple of miles along the A171 on the roundabout to Pickering, in an area known as Balliol Flats, there's a memorial to the first German plane brought down on English soil in World War II.
That's the place that people with
The British hurricane pilot who shot it down on the 3rd of February 1940 was Flight Lieutenant Peter Townsend. He later became a personal attendant to King George VI and Queen Elizabeth II. He also dated Princess Margaret. Coming up on the right after the traffic lights, the houses were made of light-coloured ballast bricks. Ships which had left Whitby fully loaded needed to be weighed down on their return journey to stop them tipping over in heavy seas. This was done by topping up any cargo with bricks. Instead of just throwing them away on their return to Whitby, the bricks were sold cheaply to local builders. We're now heading down, locally named, Down Dinner Hill. It got its name because farm workers come down here from the fields to have their lunch on the banks of the river that used to flow here. After the roundabout, we'll be on Bagdale. It was originally called Beckdale because of the beck or small river that still flows beneath the road. Bagdale is probably better known for the Tudor mansion, situated at the bottom on the right. On the left, over the extra high wall with the gated archway, is the Quakers' Graveyard. It was consecrated in 1659, and there are more people buried there than you might think, because the Quakers were not keen on using headstones. The last people to be buried there were in the early 1800s. On the right, Bagdale Hall is a Tudor mansion built in 1516 by Sir William Chumley for the Conyers family. Notable owners were James Conyers, who was appointed Sergeant of Arms to Henry VIII. Captain Bush also owned it for a while around 1643. He helped his uncle, Sir Hugh Chumley, defend Scarborough Castle during the Civil War. The hall has been renovated and extended and became a guest house in the 1960s. It's still said to be the most haunted building in Whitby. Whitby Station is on the Esk Valley line, which can take you to Middlesbrough and beyond. In 2011, the line was awarded the prestigious title of Most Scenic Railway in the UK. In 2007, North Yorkshire Moors Railway began operating a steam and vintage diesel locomotive service between Pickering and Whitby. On the left, next to the water, is the original Endevour Wharf. It was constructed in 1964, when the cargo trade in timber, steel and other commodities from continental ports was an important harbour activity. As this trade increased, the wharf was no longer needed. Coming up on the left, across the car park, the public toilet building was designed to resemble an upturned hull of a wooden boat, previously built in Whitby. A little beyond the building, you may catch a glimpse of a wooden sculpture of two men building a boat. On the left, across the railway tracks, the Old Engine Shed, or Whitby Engine Stable, to give it its official title, was built in 1847 and extended in 1868 to accommodate more locomotives. It's all the remains of a group of buildings that included signal boxes, a turntable, goods sheds, and carriage sidings to serve the station. It's now been turned into private accommodation. The next stop is Langbourne Road and Co-op, where this service terminates. If it's not the end of the day, please feel free to continue with the tour. On the other side of the roundabout, to the left of the toilet building, is Loggerhead's Yard. Loggerhead is another word for the figurehead of a ship. Boats found guilty of smuggling would be broken up and their loggerhead put on display as a deterrent to others. As we turn right at the roundabout, you'll see to the left the award-winning Trench's Seafood Restaurant, one of over 50 establishments in the town where you can enjoy the taste of fresh fish. New Quay Road, which we've turned onto, dates from the 1920s, when the old timber riverside quays were demolished. On the right is Whitby's Swing Bridge. This one was opened in 1909 and replaced the original one of 1835 because the steel ships needed more space to pass through. Boats can request it to be opened 2 hours either side of high tide. Opening of the bridge is signalled by the ringing of a handbell. We're now on St Anne's Staithe. Staithe is the Norse word for harbour. St Anne's Lane, which runs between St Anne's Staithe and the end of Flowergate, was formerly called Helm's Lane, probably because of its steepness. On the other side of the river is Whitby's lifeboat station. The white identification numbers on the lifeboat contain the names of over 10,000 donors' loved ones. Just ahead of us lies Marine Parade, which was built by the Victorians so that they could promenade along the water's edge. In earlier times, they would have had to walk up Haggersgate, which is Norse but twisted road. On the left, as we turn into narrow Haggersgate, look out for the large Georgian mansion built in 1817 for the Reynolds family. Like many of the houses around here, it was built on a sandbank, supported by piles. It became the Mission to Seamen in 1877. The quayside restaurant on your left used to be a museum and library. Before this, it was a public bathhouse. If you were lucky and afford it, you could have a bath once a week. On the opposite side of the road is the Marine Discovery Centre and Whitby Lobster Hatchery. It's helping to create a sustainable future in Whitby by working closely with the Yorkshire coast fishing industry. Their aim is to release 100,000 juvenile lobsters into the ocean every year to help maintain an ecological balance. On the left, the building with the bay windows is the popular Magpie Cafe. Built in 1750 as a merchant's house, it was later used as a pilot's office. The pilot would have had an excellent view of any activity in the harbour and on the River Esk. At the end of the road on the left is the Lifeboat Museum. The building served as a double boathouse for the RNLI between 1895 and 1957. The museum now houses the Robert and Ellen Robson, the last rowing lifeboat used in the British Isles in November 1955. The next stop is for the pier and bandstand. Please be aware of dive-bombing seagulls, especially if you're eating ice cream or chips.